final keynote speaker of the morning is Honorable Mike Rogers. As the chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence from 2011 to 2015, Chairman Rogers has a comprehensive understanding of where we have been and where Defending Forward will take us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Do you have the clicker? Slide clicker? Well, we're looking for the slide. Here we go. Technologically challenged here would be me. Well, good morning. Nothing like the time and slot into speaking where your coffee wears off and your blood sugar is low right before lunch, huh? This is the time. Yeah, most exciting. First of all, let me compliment the chairman of the Cyber Institute, someone I got to know when he was in uniform, when I was chairman and member in Congress on the Intelligence Committee, Rhett Hernandez, who is just doing a phenomenal job. And Colonel Hall, thank you very, very much for the work that you do. It's great to see someone wear the uniform, so distinguished, and then get out and continue to serve. Thank you very much for that, sir. Appreciate it. And for the cadets, thank you very much for what you are about to do. Some great questions today. I understand the Navy is coming tomorrow. No midshipmen here, right? Yeah, just like the Navy, always a day late, right? Okay. As an Army guy, I'm allowed to say that. It's good. It's all good. Even though my son is in the Navy, so I tried hard. I don't know how I failed so much. He just graduated from the Naval Academy. Huge failure in my life. I'm working through it. Oh, come on, people, for God's sake. Can't be that bad. Okay, let's talk a little bit. I want to talk about some of the changes that are happening and the importance of these changes for several reasons. And we're going to focus a little bit on 5G. I thought Heather did a fantastic job summing up what huge adversarial challenges we have coming in cyberspace. Well, let's walk through where we're going on this whole particular thing. Here we have the land of misfit toys. Yeah, you bet. For those of you who are in the cyberspace, this is where your problem is coming from, especially on the military and government side, but also in the commercial side at levels we've never seen. And we've seen policy shifts by these adversaries that are very concerning. So in the past, everybody had kind of a place. China was intellectually property motivated to steal it. The Russians were government on government cyber espionage for the tool of stealing government secrets. And all of this has changed. Kim Jong-un, my favorite guy, and I love that haircut. I do love that haircut. And even Iran, we've seen policy changes where now they're using their military and intelligence services not only just to steal some secrets, but also to steal money and be disruptive. For the first time, we saw the Chinese actually shut down a manufacturing facility, and people 2 years ago would have said, oh, they'll never do it, right? Not in their interest. They did it. Why? Probably a little tension in the trade war. They decided we can hurt them economically. They're going to flip that switch, right? And they have the capability. So now we're not just talking about worrying about them getting into networks and stealing intellectual property. Now they're actually doing disruptive attacks to hurt the economy. They have all participated in efforts to hurt the U.S. economy in different ways. So what's next? I want to talk about how espionage is changing to that end for all of our land of misfit toys. Yeah, there we go. If you look at this slide, the one up in the upper left was the Russian operation. They seated about 10 people here. They all took pseudonyms, American names, had great legends, their backstops that they would all look and appear for all intents and purposes Americans. And they had a long 20-year plan. That was in a Russian operation. U.S. doesn't do long 20-year plans and undercover operations. This was really an amazing feat. A lot of people kind of yawned as it went by, but that was an amazing thing. Actually, their kids, anybody American fans here? No? No one? No one watches Americans? Jeez, what the heck is going on in here? My God. Lord have mercy. Well, you all watched Declassified then. Oh, that's right. That's my show. Boy, you are a tough crowd. That's all I'm saying. No wonder my ratings tanked this year. The reason that was interesting is, since one of the episodes portrayed this, one of the couples that were here for this long-term 25-year operation had their kids, a 17-year-old boy, commissioned as a major in the FSB during this operation, meaning they were getting ready to seat somebody. Remember, born here, Irish surname, that person was going to be a trained intelligence officer to go through the process to get into some government agency. This was really an incredible long-term, and thankfully we got information on the other side of the pond that helped us stop this, or we may have had bigger problems. When you look at some of the other folks in this list, it just goes to show you the efforts that they're going to. The last three on the slide, so the Army reservist, accused of, China, of spying for China, by the way, trained intelligence officer, trained for that very purpose, went through a STEM program to become a reservist, get a secret clearance, and he was at a university working near very sensitive government information. One of his taskings, right, not steal the blueprints, steal credentials. Think of that, right? The new wave of espionage is human-enabled, getting in to your networks, maybe not by brute force, but by sneaking around the inside, by stealing credentials. Same with Kennedy there, who was a North Korean spy recruited in France. He was not a very sophisticated spy, candidly, and he had another problem. He just wasn't in the meetings that he needed to be. But what did he have access to? Computer systems and IT. What did they want him to steal? They wanted him to steal credentials. Same with Monica Witt, who was a counterintelligence officer for the United States Air Force, who over the course of time specialized in the Middle East, specialized on Iran, and through interactions over time, they were able to find her, recruit her, and one of her big taskings, get us into your network. Right? Don't steal the papers and shove them in your socks on the way out the door. Get me into your network. If you think about what that means for espionage and the way it's changing, that has huge implications for all of us in this room. So Huawei 5G, right? Everybody's talking about Huawei and 5G. Who cares? Why should we care? That's why we should care. The U.S. prosecutors probe Huawei on allegations, technology theft. Right? We know that they physically used agents, not intelligence officer, but agents of intelligence officer to steal equipment. My favorite Huawei theft story is when there was a company that had a device called Tappy, and it was a robotic arm that was testing the glass tapping on an iPhone, so it could make sure that it could withstand all of the pressure, and they're just trying to make sure it's commercially viable, it can take a beating, and still provide you service. They couldn't figure out to steal, to get into the network, and it was pretty well air gap. So they sent somebody who was supposed to be in the building, a recruited Chinese agent, to rip the hand off of the robot, shove it in a briefcase, and basically try to run out the door. I wish I were kidding, right? The theft of Tappy. That's how they were going to get it. Really aggressive when you think about it. And it was a Huawei that was an employee affiliated with Huawei. On the other side of that, if you look at the other side of the pond there, our friends in Australia came out pretty aggressively. Their spy chief never talks. Their spy chief came out and said, hey, Huawei in our networks, big problem. And Huawei wants to build all the 5G that it can get. Well, what kind of things can happen if they control networks? Well, glad you asked. China Telecom diverted about 90 days, roughly, of email traffic from Canada. Not a certain area, not a big, all of it, for about 90 days. Ran it through Beijing. Why would you do that? Look, think of the amount of data you'd have to store. Well, imagine if you are already collecting data on Chinese citizens. They have some 900 million files on Chinese citizens and growing. They have some estimates I've seen as high as 2,500 data points on each citizen in China. They know about big data. Matter of fact, one of the reasons that their AI algorithms are supposed to be better than US algorithms, not because we can't compete with the intellectual property of writing, designing, and implementing AI algorithms, it's because their data set is so huge that AI algorithm learns a little faster, a little quicker, a little better, right? So if you have that capability, now you're taking all of this data, and the reason they stole that data, according to analysts, is because they wanted to get an advantage in a trade negotiation with Canada. So go through, you take a snapshot, you apply an AI algorithm to find exactly the kind of information you're looking for in that massive amount of data. Boy, as a counterintelligence guy, I was an FBI guy, counterintelligence, you get a little bead of sweat on your forehead thinking, man, if they have that capability, imagine what they can do if they control data all over the world. Makes me nervous. And you think about what that means to the United States military. I'm gonna pick on the Navy here a little bit. You think about, in the early days, if you had any communication about the whereabouts of one of our fleets, right? Our carrier group, running around doing great things for the United States of America. And by the way, the Navy's the most deployed force that we have. It's always out there and always exposed. You can go online right now and find out where every one of our carrier groups are. Open source, right? Well, why? That used to be a treasonous act. The reason is that thing is a blowtorch for signals coming off of it. Think of all the sensors that are on that ship that just never existed before. There's a lot of stuff on that ship talking to each other, and there's a lot of communications flying off of that thing, everything from GPS to other systems, including weapons system communications, that would allow that thing, there's no way in God's green earth you're gonna hide it. Not anymore, right? So you can go online and figure out exactly where they are. And the problem was that our friends in the Navy had a very difficult time keeping people getting into those signals, trying to get around all of those sensors that are, or get into all of those sensors that are on those ships and do bad things, right? Really bad things. Matter of fact, the Navy has changed a little bit quicker some of the other services because they had the inability to stop certain countries from getting into certain weapon systems and causing us trouble. Nobody wants to be on that ship and get ready to push the fire button and nothing happened, right? Huge problem, something people didn't think about. Now, if you think about all the sensors on that ship, all the connectivity that's happening on the ship, a lot of that has for good reason. Imagine if you just start multiplying that surface of attack and threat throughout all of the countries around the world. And that's what's gonna happen with 5G in a way that we have just never seen before. And by the way, so the Chinese, we know we're doing this, the Russians have been trying to get on our boats, all of that, and you can read lots of public source information on this. And then the Russians have decided they're gonna change their techniques. They might not actually be able to recruit somebody or get through, force their way through your firewall, even though they're the most capable cyber warriors. So they're just gonna, come to you. Why not? Let's come to you. This is my favorite case. So the Russians were in a hurry. Remember when they tried to kill the dissidents, or they did kill the dissidents in Great Britain? They poisoned them. So the OPCW was going through and going to do the official investigation and then release the results to the world's public on who was responsible. And I don't know, and the FBI, where you could find a trace on the airplane of the chemical, a flight from Moscow, we would call that a clue. Wow. Blood sugar down, caffeine down. You're thinking, oh my God, would he stop talking? Okay, here we go. So this is why this was an important case. They decided, and it was not great tradecraft. They get 4 kind of burly Russian dudes to fly in, a whole bunch of tradecraft problems. They actually had an embassy official meet them at the airport. Not a great idea, right? People might be interested in, say, embassy employees meeting people at the airport, right? And so they stuff in a little tiny car. You can see how it wasn't all that big, but they had already configured that car with that particular equipment, including, by the way, a Stingray, which was the most important part of this operation. So you get 4 big burly Russian dudes. These are all GRU officers who had cyber training. They stuff into the car. They drive to the headquarters and hang out for 4 to 6 hours. Again, what will we call that in the FBI? A clue, right? Something's going on. And so when they intercepted this operation, and what that Stingray does, by the way, for those who are not familiar, it collects, it's just basically another antenna, and it pretends your cell phone is talking to another tower. It hits that Stingray and it just sucks it down. So over time, they were getting all of this data coming out of the headquarters, and they had the real-time processor. The computer that they had in there was pretty amazing in its processing capability. And guess what? Over time, over that 4 hours, even though they got caught, they were able to get in because they were stealing credentials and using other tools to get around certainly security firewalls to get into the headquarters, and they were successful. They did it. Holy mackerel. I mean, I don't have to recruit an agent, and I don't have to be in Beijing or Moscow or Tehran, and actually to get into your system, I can actually show up and fool you? Yep, absolutely. Think about how exposed we are and open in the United States and our other Western allied countries to that kind of an operation. If they weren't in a hurry, they probably would have done it a little better, including, by the way, they found all the receipts for certain pieces of equipment in the trash in the hotel room. So anybody knows anything about intelligence operations, receipts can kill you, literally. And of course, if you know anything about the way military handles receipts, it kills you because of the paperwork trying to get reimbursed for that. Okay, all right. Now you're with me. Okay, good. Now, when it's your money, now I got your attention. I got it, okay. And so you think the Iranians don't want to be outdone? This was a really significant operation for two reasons. The biggest concern that I have is social media and social engineering. That is fundamentally changing the way I can get at you. When I was an FBI agent, if you could recruit the Soviet code clerk, right, you get promoted immediately, right? You get a brand new FBI car, waxed and everything. It's really amazing, right? Because that was where all the encryption and decryption happened at an embassy. So if you can recruit that clerk to help you understand how that is working inside the embassy, man, that's bonanza. Think about how we do it today. So what we would do is, back then, we would take a profile of life, a pattern of life. We would know everything about them. By the way, that's the way the Russians, even today, you can't get access to a code clerk. They're basically locked in the basement for their entire tour. They will not let them out of the compound for the reasons that guys like me were sniffing around trying to get at them, right? And so they knew that. Well, nowadays, I don't need that. How many IT administrators are there on your network? Probably a dozen. Some cases 24. This is private sector, government, right? Every one of those persons presents an opportunity and a vulnerability to your system. It's not that they're bad, it's just they become targets for us trying to get in or bad people trying to get in and around and get into your network. Huge problem. And how do I do that now? Do I have to follow you around and understand where your cleaners are and try to understand all that? Nope. I just go on your LinkedIn page. I go on your social media page. I go into your Twitter feed. I can find out everything about you. And that's exactly how our friends in Iran were able to target these professors doing very sensitive work on behalf of the United States government. They did it at 170 US universities. And I forget the number overseas, but it was somewhere between 90 and 100 different universities. And they did it through the old-fashioned way. I enticed people through watering holes. Hey, Mike, you're really interested in scuba diving. Or Mike, I can see that you are a marathon runner. Now that seems hurtful, people. That just seems hurtful. So, they're trying to find ways and things that you're interested in. And I know all that because I can go online in about 20 minutes and get a really nice profile of who you are. They did that. The Iranians did that, and they were very sophisticated in the social engineering. It got down eventually to about 8,000 professors of interest, and they penetrated those networks through this long socialization process and social engineering process and reeled them in. And they think they stole somewhere between, I think the last number I saw was around $20 billion in uncopyrighted, unpatented research, right? It hadn't gotten there yet. So they just took it all, stole it. It all had military implications. Really, really concerning. And so this whole social engineering coming to a place near you. You look at the generation coming up in cyber and fill in any occupation in the US government or military, their whole life is out there on social media. We know that the Chinese use LinkedIn. There's a really great public report on that recently. We know the Russians use LinkedIn. It's a great place to narrow down your scope, right? I need somebody that works at company A that has access to Y. I can find that profile on LinkedIn. Then I go through this whole other operation we just talked about. Who are their friends? Where do they go? By the way, if I'm a really sophisticated actor, I'll get in and track your phone. I'll know that you go to church on Sunday or you go to synagogue on Saturday. All of that I can figure out with a pretty short time frame in things that used to take us a year, 2 years to try to figure out. And that's how they're getting better at doing this. So when the Iranians are that good, I guarantee you our Chinese and Russian friends who are way advanced and spend lots of time, energy, and money are getting better at it as well. North Korea, this says it all. I love this quote. Cyber warfare, along with nuclear weapons, is an all-purpose sword that our military capability gives our military capability to strike relentlessly. We know that he's invested in this because he needs the cash. hundreds of millions of dollars. So they're not out really trying to crack in your system to steal anything. I probably are, but they're not going to be very good at it. It'll be a little clumsy. But what they have gotten good at is finding ways to steal lots of money. The Bangladeshi bank netted them $80 million, right? And they need that for the sole purpose of putting it back into the government. They're not doing well financially. Anybody buy anything recently that said, made in North Korea? All right. Please talk to me after. Need to see you about that, right? And so this is their path. This is what they know they will use, right? And they're going to get better and better. We're already seeing them get better and better at what they're doing. The new tech frontier. This is why this is so important with 5G on the horizon, why everybody's talking about should you or shouldn't you buy really cheap Huawei gear that has some functionality. And oh, by the way, their new tactic is to say, hey, you can have the gear. You don't have to pay $1 for 3 years. Any private company in the world can compete with that? Nope, they cannot. So what is the reason? And Heather talked about 2025 made in China. They also have a data control by 2025. Imagine if what they're doing with their own citizens. Think of this. They have a credit scoring system in China. Last year, remember, everything you do, right? If you get out there and say, President Xi is a rat, right? Whoops, that goes down in your file. That will leave a mark. And so what they were doing last year alone, this is already happening. This isn't Orwellian. This isn't 10 years. This isn't something we should worry about maybe next generation. They prohibited 3 million Chinese citizens from buying a domestic airline ticket or a domestic train ticket because the Communist Party in China didn't think they were living up to the Communist Party standards. Now, if that doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck go up, oh, and really, they want to have access to European data, right? And our European friends love them to death, but they're just folding like a cheap wedding chair when it comes to cheap Huawei gear. I thought that was funny too, but I love my European friends. I spent a lot of time traveling around the world with our Five Eye partners and others trying to talk through the security problems of 5G and allowing anything to run over Huawei gear. If you control the patch to any piece of equipment, you're going to own that piece of equipment. I'm sorry, that's the way it works. It's a built-in vulnerability. So some notion that people are going to mitigate this and they're smarter than the Chinese operators to do that, great. As I told my Canadian friends at one point, please show us how this is done. We're dying to know how you beat the nation state of China and Russia and Iran on these big operations. Oh, by the way, nobody has shown that we can do it, including the United States. We have vulnerabilities, right? So it's a huge thing. And now, so what's next? Something like 50 billion devices will be connected to the internet. 50 billion, including your refrigerator. And I don't know about the rest of you. I think my refrigerator's working against me already, let alone, boy, this is a tough crowd. So I got two things I know. If I say something about your money, that's funny, and your refrigerator, that's funny. I got that done. All right, just checking. So if you think about it, all the stories about devices in your home that you can have communication with that have been compromised. Duh, right? Talking Barbie. I used to have a sextant too, that I would take a talking Barbie and a sextant when I would travel around the country. And the sextant, by the way, in 2017, every new commissioned Navy officer had to learn how to use a sextant. Why? Because what happens if GPS does go out, right? And then you have a just big bobbing ship out there with nowhere to go. They don't know where they're at and where they're going. You try to take a sextant and a talking Barbie through TSA, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have some challenges. So I changed that, and those pull-aside rooms are very, very chilly, is all I'm saying. I think I'm funny. I don't know what's and so if you think about all these devices, every one of those is a new threat platform that's coming at us. And when you add 5G over it, the sheer size and capability and volume, and all of the gear that's coming for that is amazing. So all of that gear, oh, by the way, we're talking about supply chain. We're not just talking about the operation of it. All of that gear, where is that gear made, and can we control it? Right? So that you see how small it's gotten. Those 5G apparatus on that light pole is where they're going. Now here's the problem. We're going to have lots and lots and lots of them. Right now we have, you see the 4G, you've seen all of those, right? In order to get that great picture with your camera. It relies on all of that. 5G means that we're going to have as many as 5 and 6 and 8 and 10 times more of those units in order to make 5G work. You have to be closer together. They're form beams. So what you're going to have to do is shorter distance in urban areas, maybe a little longer in rural areas, but you're going to have lots and lots and lots of it. And so what does that mean for us? The good, the bad, the ugly? So here's what 5G does. If you look at where we're at on that, just look at the difference in that chart. So if you take 1/3 of an acre, right? Here's a better way to learn this. You guys, the tech guys got this already. For those who are not so techy, let's do it this way. Where we go? Yep, potatoes. So you take 4,000 potatoes and put them in a circle, end to end. 4,000 potatoes in a circle, end to end. That's about 1/3 of an acre, right? You can invite 2,000 of your friends today in that circle, the circle of potatoes in 1/3 of an acre. And you can live stream with some latency, some disruption, some blip in your watching. You can all live stream all at the same time with a decent 4G signal. It's a lot, 2,000 people, 1/3 of an acre with, first of all, what are you standing in a circle of potatoes? I don't know. Now you think, what happens with 5G? How many can you get in there in 5G? Think of this. Over 1 million people can stand in that same place, live streaming at the same time with just virtually no latency, meaning you're not going to get a blip. Think of the power difference of that. I mean, it's amazing. It's hard to get our heads around what that's going to mean. Now, the good news of this stuff is it's going to be fantastic. And then the clickers will work without any latency at all. Whoops, I went too far. Can you go back for me? Thank you. Faster speed, here it is. 3G, you want to do a movie, you download a typical 2-hour movie, 26 hours to download that movie. 4G, 6 minutes, right? Massive improvement with 4G, massive improvement. With 5G, 3 seconds. Just think of that. I mean, just the time, the speed. And you can think about an interconnected world where you're working SCADA systems that are producing something or running mining operations or running just-in-the-time manufacturing facilities. That's amazing what you can do and the efficiencies with that fast. You want a car that drives by itself? You need that 3 seconds, right? You need 5G so there's no blip, that you have as much bandwidth as you possibly need getting into that car. You don't want a 3-second delay or someone gets run over, right? And so that's why people are pushing. You want autonomous cars, you got to get there. You want drones that actually show up and bring you the right thing that you ordered at your house without flying into a car or a person or anything else. You need 5G really to accomplish that. And it will be an amazing thing. The increased connectivity goes without saying. Think of this, 100 times more devices at 100 times the speed and 10 times reduced responsivity. I mean, it's hard to get your head around. That's what's coming with 5G, but it has such positive impact for our economy. You want real-time medicine, you want remote operations, you want, again, cars that drive, you want to make sure that your refrigerator tells you that you need to stop and get some milk. The only problem is, people, that it will tell on you, and your wife will find out if you buy a Snickers bar. That's the only bad part of that. Trust me on this. When you talk about new opportunities, it's just endless. You can just kind of go ad infinitum about the power of 5G and what it's going to bring to promote productivity and an increased benefit economically in our lives. The one thing I didn't say, just the economic engine of this. Think of this. They think 3 million new jobs, right, to make all this work, and $500 billion just to the U.S. economy. Just to the U.S. economy. It's amazing. To give you a size of scope, the entire GDP of Colombia is about $350 billion. just to the United States, an additional $500 billion, right? That's why the race is on. That's why the fight's going. Here's our problems. We have been very slow in the United States to a national 5G strategy. I'm on some working groups for this for the government. It is a maddening, slow pace when folks are moving out around us at a very quick pace. Increased digital divide, candidly, when they talk about 5G and it's coming to you, it's really a glorified 4G that the advertisers are coming at you. It does work faster. It has all of those capabilities. It's not really 5G. 5G will be built around urban centers, easier, and probably higher need, and people will be willing to pay for it, right? Do you really need 5G every day in your personal life? Candidly, probably not at least right away. So there's some time for that. And it's going to be purposely built for certain facilities that need that kind of bandwidth to operate whatever business they're doing. You know, mining comes to mind is a big one. They're really excited about this because they want to automate as much of that as they can. You want autonomous vehicles down there doing the hard work under the ground. This is a great way to do it with 5G. You can't really do it without 5G. It just doesn't work as well. Spectrum, huge problem. This is what our big fight is. China's using a mid-band. We're looking at these millimeter waves. Remember, the sheer volume of millimeter wave small stations that we'd have to have is unbelievable. So the cost is huge, the power use is huge, puts us at, I think, a little bit of a disadvantage. The United States military, a particular branch, is not excited about giving up any of its mid-band capability, and for the right reason. I think there's a way through this that we can get there, but we better do it soon. If we wait another 18 months to decide that we're going to free up mid-band and spectrum, we lose. China wins, right? That's where the fight is right now on the ability to do this. The ugly, quickly, China's digital dominance strategy. Listen, I talked about that credit scoring system. We've already seen that they use economic extortion when they have data to their availability or market share. You know, remember, they went into the Netherlands and said, hey, you either put in 5G gear or we're not buying fish, right? You want to talk about an economic problem for the Netherlands? That's it, right? So they're using this economic extortion to get it. They're using data, and you say, well, what does it matter? If they're only abusing their own citizens, why should we care? Well, hopefully that's a self-evident answer. But if not, what if I understand that people in businesses around the world say, like, I don't know, the NBA, I bet I can make them, get down on one knee for $1 billion market. No, that would never happen. Oh, that's right, that happened, right in front of all of us. And so you think about the business that wants to do it. If they sell widgets, guess what? They get to look up, they have all this data, they're looking at the data and saying, listen, on our international score sheet, you didn't score high enough. You don't get to do business with China. You don't get to do business with company X or Y or Z. Huge problem. This is, again, why we're working with our European allies to understand what risk is on the other side of the horizon. Not quite there yet, but we're working on it. And I appreciate our European allies who are here for this particular program. Hopefully we can kind of get there. The two dolls on the top are Kayla, just to give you an idea. They've already moved out, they being our adversarial intelligence services. Those are Kayla dolls. They were actually banned by the German parliament as weapons of espionage, right? So folks were getting into the communication stream between those dolls and the internet, and they were turning them on, the microphones, to listen, and using them as devices for communication illicitly. So that's already happening. So you think your family is there with a doll in the back room, everything's fine. As an old FBI guy, it makes the hair step on my neck that private hackers can get into that too. It used to be if you're up to no good, this was a spying case, but if you're up to no good for other reasons, you used to have to go down to the playground and troll around a little bit. Easier for parents to catch you, police to catch you. What if I can have that conversation with a child in their home, the safety of their home, and lure that child outside, right? To me, huge problem. Haven't quite dealt with it yet. On the vulnerability side, again, we talked a lot about this. Just the sheer volume and threat means you have a lot more places to come at you. Some say that we can build a more secure 5G than we have today. Yeah, maybe, and I'm for that. And I think with software-defined networks, we have a huge opportunity to lay over VPNs over these networks and really kind of start to tighten it down. But remember, you are susceptible to every vulnerability that's there. And again, who's patching the equipment you're riding over? That's what I would worry about. That's where I'm coming to get you, right? If I'm patching it, I'm going to own it. And if you think of just the sheer volume, just to give you an idea, in 1991, we had one website in the world. One, right? 1991. Today, we're approaching 2 billion. That's just websites. These are just portals to do either good things or bad things. In our criminal element, know all about the bad things. So here we go, old threat. It's new technology. The way we're spying is changing. The targets, the mission sets that they're giving spies is changing. Human-enabled cyber operations getting huge. The new technology can be great. It's going to be a blessing. It's going to be fantastic. But we're foolish if we don't look at the security implications of this. And we definitely will see this increased risk. Sensors mean risk. And when you think about everything we just talked about doing that's good, it involves hundreds and thousands of sensors per operation. Man, that's just, you're a defense cyber guy. They're the ones, the bead of sweat, and you see them shaking in the morning. Those are, what they're doing for a living. It's just really hard to defend against. How we win, very quickly. Here's how we do it. Open up the spectrum. We ought to, just as U.S. government, we ought to say, here's mid-band. We're going to put it up for auction. Go forth and build 5G networks like as fast as you can, and use your own money. Don't ask for the government for the money. Go use your own money. You know you'll benefit from this. Open source, meaning instead of a proprietary source code on all the routers and other things, a lot of which the Chinese stole from U.S. companies already, right? Make it open source. Make it a commodity. Shouldn't matter. Everybody has to declare what source code's on there. That way it's easier for us to see what bad things happen when they're trying to patch these things, number one. And number two, it allows those things to be worthless, relatively worthless. You can give that away as part of running a network and still make money. And then the real innovation happens when we U.S. innovators and our allies and European allies start developing software-defined networks that lay over this gear. Huge win, I think, for all of us, but it has to happen fast. And the last part, China is controlling the standards bodies around the world. They've invested in sending people to set what the standards are for 5G. I guarantee you it will not be in our U.S. interests or our allies' interests to let the Chinese write these standards. The U.S. government is now kind of getting a clue on this. They're trying to turn it around, but we're a little bit behind the 8 ball on that, and we better do it. You do those 3 things, we're going to win 5G, and we graduate these young cadets to do really amazing things in cyber warfare. We're also going to beat them back in the next generation. Thanks for having me.